So hello everyone. I'm going to be in conversation today with Erika Brooke from the University of Florida and Xavier Castillo from an institution in Ecuador. But before we get stuck in, Xavier, please tell us which institution you're from and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Okay, thank you for this space. I'm Xavier Andrade, professor of criminal law and criminal procedure, in charge of the criminal subspecialization in the jurisprudence or law school at the San Francisco de Quito University in Ecuador.
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. And Erika, introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Erika Brooke. I am an associate instructional professor in criminology in the Department of Sociology, Criminology, and Law at the University of Florida in Gainesville.
Now, you guys have been in partnership doing a virtual exchange in sociology and criminal law. So where did that partnership, how did you meet and how did that partnership strike up? I don't mind who wants to answer that question.
So we actually met through Paloma at the University of Florida. So she had a connection at Javier's institution, and she knew I was on the hunt for a partner. And as soon as he kind of volunteered, she said, "Hey, you guys would be a great match." We met, and we have been running a virtual exchange for 6 semesters since.
Wow, Xavier. So Paloma, I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago. She is really powerful in her passion for virtual exchange.
Yes, well, first of all, we started a virtual exchange project with great enthusiasm because it was an innovative and great proposal, both for the students, especially for me as a university professor. I had no previous contact with Erika, that's true, uh, but nor did I know the topics and subjects that she was investigating. And despite this, without having formally introduced by myself or having any previous teaching training, I love the idea of venturing into this kind of dynamics and innovation in university teaching. That was.
Okay. And Erika, how was it when you struck up the partnership and started the virtual exchange?
So Javier took a complete leap of faith. I had taken virtual exchange training. I was excited. I had a project structured, and I met him and I said, "Hey, Javier, you want to come on board?" And he graciously expressed so much grace with me and said yes and followed the lead. And here we are 6 semesters later.
So your students study sociology and criminal law on both sides, or is it interdisciplinary?
So my students are criminology. So I've done it in 2 classes. I have students from a careers and criminal justice course, and then I've also done it in my prisons and jails class. So predominantly majoring in criminology on my end.
So Xavier, what makes it a virtual exchange? What do the students have to get from each other in your criminology and sociology?
Uh, Erica made a list of students from both her group and mine in Ecuador. My students of the law school, and they were students of criminal law. So I think that we can make them combine it each other and form their working groups was the first step, I think. And then we send each other's emails so that they could contact each other and then send a first video introducing themselves.
I Okay. And how did it progress from there, Erika? What were the next steps in the virtual exchange? So the all important introductions to build that trust and relationship building, and then what did they need to do after that?
So our project extends over 12 weeks. And so we do bi-weekly discussions. And those biweekly discussions are really scaffolded on the topics that we're discussing in the course, excuse me. So at the beginning, like Javier said, we get a list of students who will be participating. In my class, it's required. In Javier's class, it's for extra credit. So we get the lists, we create the groups, we try to keep them small groups so we can keep the discussion authentic. So we try to do, two of my students, two of his students, etc., depending on class sizes, right?
Of course.
And so from there, they do their introduction. And so this assignment, not only are we guiding discussions for them, but we're also allowing them to practice those time management skills, right? So they are to set up these synchronous meetings with one another. And in that introduction email that Javier described, they're not only introducing themselves, some fun facts, what they're studying, future plans, they're also setting up a communication plan. And so in that, kind of discussing, hey, when we are going to have these meetings, what days and times of the week work best? But also, how are we going to communicate about these meetings? So for instance, are we going to use email or are we going to communicate via text through WhatsApp? And so we want to set that momentum from the beginning so we can continue out. And so from there, there's discussion centered around the topics. I guess I should have mentioned previously that when Javier and I are setting up the groups, we're also setting up discussion questions, right? So we want to make sure that discussion topics for each of the weeks of the discussions are centered around topics we're covering in class. So we definitely sit here and what do we think about this question, that question, because we provide the students a list of discussion questions to help guide their discussion. But
I'm interested. Sorry, I'm interested in asking you also with the sociology and criminology, what topics are they talking? What are they? What's the meat of it? What's the learning outcome, and what are they required to ask each other?
Yeah, we talk about the components. We talk about system issues, kind of what their perception on the law is and who violates the law. Javier's added in some scenario questions where we'd look at offenders the same way if they were the main offender or maybe someone who was just driving the getaway car. We've asked them whether or not they view police as legitimate, whether they think corrections should be focused on rehabilitative or more of a retribution focus. So basically having them dive into the different facets of the justice system and kind of allowing them to analyze and assess and reflect the practices of their own system while comparing it to one abroad.
So, Xavier, what are some of the similarities or differences that came out of these discussions? What did the students discover? Because presumably they're asking about your respective systems and trying to find out more. So what were some of the interesting highlights?
Very important way to start was that I asked to my students to use a clear language and not a lawyer language that can be it could be very technical. That is for us an important thing because we have different cultures. My students' first observation were that they had a totally different idea of how criminal justice and maybe death penalty or role of the police investigating people worked, etc. For example, in my country, the police are not as respected as in the USA. They were even very excited to see how we had issues in common, such as an adversarial system and cases of corruption of officials, for example. That was very interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Erika, do you want to say anything on the back of what Xavier has been telling us?
Yeah, same thing. My students also were surprised by Javier's students' reactions when they started to talk about the court system. So, for instance, in the U.S., we employ a jury system, and they don't do that in Ecuador. So it was a very reflective piece for both my students and his students to consider is a jury a better option than just a decision made by a judge and that.
Interesting. Yeah. And what feedback did you get from the students having done this experience? What was their reaction at the end? Were they, yeah, did their minds open? Did they change anything? What happened?
An important conclusion could be that an important exchange between students from different careers, different cultures, different universities always brings knowledge and breaks certain myths.
Yes.
So friendships are made,
Yes.
could even find many similarities. In two words, a real adventure for me.
What about at your end, Erica?
Similar things. Students were making networking connections, still remaining social media friends afterwards. A couple of the takeaways that they discussed was our virtual exchange. An additional product of that was that it occurred during major events, major global events. So not only did it come on the tail end of the pandemic, um, it also took place during two U.S. major elections. It also took place during major prison riots in Ecuador. So it was able to provide not only context to my students about the position of the US in the global environment, but it also provide them some real world perspectives of, for example, what was occurring in the riots in Ecuador, right? And so it really provided that additional feedback that they weren't necessarily getting out of the news reports that they found interesting.
Mm-mm-mm. And were there any challenges or difficulties or things you had to, because you said you've run it for 6 semesters, has your VE evolved or been modified or?
I think it's run similarly the structure throughout. We've updated discussion questions. I think we've worked through student issues much better. The biggest issue I think that we saw, and Javier, correct me if I'm wrong, was really about students managing their time to meet, right? So they would wait to the last minute to meet. And I would message Javier, hey, could we get in contact with so and so? Them working through time zone differences. So my students didn't realize sometimes Ecuador, when we have the time zone change, they fall behind us, and so managing that. So I think it really emphasized those time management skills. But I think that was probably the biggest challenge. But it was a learning lesson, right? In the real world, we're going to have issues with group work and meeting and those types of things. So it was a good way to have them work through it.
No, you're right. I think, in addition, maybe a challenge is to maintain not only one class, maybe, but several learning semesters, and together to adjust curricular themes and curricula maybe could be a challenge. Maybe schedules, maybe evaluation technology, and also challenge professors, students, I know, universities maybe, no?
Yeah.
Curriculum.
I have a question for Erica. You mentioned you did virtual exchange training before you embarked on this. So one of you had training and one didn't. How much of an impact did the training have?
So, in terms of establishing the virtual exchange and the structure, the training was huge because the training had us at the end of it. The goal was you're going to build a virtual exchange project that you're going to implement in a class. So, I was able to say, hey, Javier, here's the plan that I have in place. Are you on board? What do you think? And we were able to run with that. Um, if I hadn't done the training, I think coming up with the assignment and how would we structure it, that would have been a challenge that would have taken some time considering the short amount of time before we had the start of the semester.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you get on with your day about any highlights or any advice you'd like to give to other educators thinking of embarking on such a thing? Because virtual exchange is a lot of extra work, isn't it, at the end of the day? So not if you have institutional support, it's one thing, and if you don't, then yeah. So I'm just wondering if you had any advice for others thinking about this.
I would say, give yourself grace. The first semester is going to be a bumpy one, even if you have a plan in place. But I will tell you the hard work pays off. So the first semester was probably the toughest in terms of time and logistics and things. But now that we have been on this partnership um, for these 6 semesters, I would say that it's gotten easier to implement. The other thing would be that don't be afraid to adapt it to other courses. I've traditionally ran this in one course. There was one semester I wasn't offering this particular course. I was offering a prisons course. And so I didn't want to lose the momentum with Javier. So I just made some minor adjustments, but we were able to continue on despite the difference of the curriculum on my side.
I was thinking, I think that uh, it's important. Two things for me in that kind of experience. The first thing is that when you have a great proposal, you have a great project, and you can take this with a great enthusiasm because it was a things that we connect between cultures and between curriculums and between evaluation the things related to the maybe some careers like that. So I think that maybe take the risk.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing your experience today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for me. Practicing my English is very important for me.